The last time I spoke to my grandpa, he was looking out the window and said, "It's strange knowing you've seen your last spring." I thought he meant it poetically, but when the call came that Sunday, I realized he was saying goodbye the only way he knew how. It was a Thursday afternoon in late March. Not warm, but the sun was out in that soft, early spring way. Just enough to make you think about opening a window, but not enough to actually do it. I was supposed to be catching up on work. Emails, spreadsheets, meetings I kept pushing. My phone was blowing up with reminders and overdue tasks. But then my mom texted. Just 2 lines. "Can you stop by and see Grandpa today? He's been quiet lately. I think he's lonely." I almost didn't go. I hovered over the reply box, thinking, I'll go tomorrow. But something pulled me back. I can't explain it. I just grabbed my keys and went. He lived in a small ranch-style house a few towns over, same one he'd been in since the 70s. Beige siding, cracked driveway, one wind chime by the porch that never quite hung straight. Inside always smelled like coffee and old newspapers. When I walked in, he was in the usual spot, the recliner by the front window. That recliner was practically shaped to his body by now. The fabric had faded where his head rested and frayed at the corners. He wasn't reading, just staring out. "Hey, Pops," I said, setting my bag down. "You fall asleep with your eyes open?" He didn't smile. Just gave a slow nod without turning. His voice was low, like it had sunk into the quiet around him. "Nice day," he said. "Sun's finally warming the ground." I stood next to him, hands in my jacket pockets, staring out at the same patch of grass and leafless trees. "Almost spring," I said. That's when he said it. Not loudly, not even to me, I think, just out loud. "It's strange, knowing you've seen your last spring." I blinked. "What? You mean like, metaphorically?" He didn't answer right away, just turned his head slowly, met my eyes. "No. I know. I won't be here for the next one." I laughed a little uncomfortable. "Don't say that." He just looked back out the window, like the conversation was over, like it was all already decided. I didn't push it. Instead, I made him tea, sat with him while he drank it. We talked about nothing. The neighbor's new car, a local kid who got drafted into the minors. He nodded along but didn't say much. He was thinner than I remembered. His cardigan hung loose on his shoulders and his socks didn't match, one gray, one dark blue. The kind of small detail that used to bother him. But he didn't seem to care anymore. Before I left, he stood slowly and walked me to the door. That surprised me. Usually he just waved from the chair. He put a hand on my arm. "Drive safe. Take your time." I gave a little smile. "See you soon, Grandpa." He didn't say it back, just nodded again. That was the last time I saw him alive. The call came on Sunday morning. I was still in bed. The ringtone barely woke me, but when I saw it was my mom, I sat up fast. Her voice didn't break. It just paused. "He passed last night. In his sleep. Just didn't wake up." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. I just held the phone, listening to the silence on the other end. And all I could hear in my head was his voice. "It's strange, knowing you've seen your last spring." It wasn't poetry. It wasn't dramatic. He knew. He was telling me. And I brushed it off. The funeral was small. Quiet. Just family and 2 of his old neighbors. It was cold again that day, gray and windy. Like spring had backed off. I sat in the back row, barely listening. My mind kept going back to that window. That chair. That sentence. A week later, I went back to his house. Just to look around. My mom hadn't packed anything up yet. Everything was exactly where it had been. The tea mug still on the side table. The remote on the armrest. His slippers tucked neatly under the footrest like he'd be back in a minute. I sat in the chair. Looked out the same window. It wasn't a special view. Some patchy lawn, a crooked fence, a maple tree just starting to bud. But I realized it was special because it was his. Because that's what he saw when he said goodbye. And the thing that gets me, the part one can't shake, is that he didn't ask for more time. He didn't cry. He didn't fight it. He just looked out the window, felt the warmth on his skin, and said goodbye the only way he knew how. The next few weeks passed like water slipping through my hands. I'd find myself reaching for my phone to text him when I saw something he'd laugh at. A headline about a guy trying to fry an egg on his car hood in Arizona. A video of a dog stealing groceries from someone's porch. Stupid little things. Things I always sent him. Then I'd remember. And that quiet would come back, the kind that doesn't sound like anything but still fills the room. I started visiting the house more. My mom said it helped her if I checked in. But really, I think I just didn't want him to be gone all at once. Being there, it was like he was just out for a walk. Like he might come in any minute, clear his throat and say, "Well, the birds are back." The house held onto his presence in these small, stubborn ways. His comb still on the bathroom counter. That old green thermos in the sink, half-washed. The crossword book with a pencil still tucked into the middle. I sat on his bed one afternoon and opened his drawer, not looking for anything in particular. Just wanting to touch something he'd touched. There was a stack of letters. Not addressed, not mailed. Just folded notes, yellowed at the edges. Some were to my mom. One was to my dad, who left years ago. Most were to Henry, his old dog. No one else ever knew he wrote those. I read one, then two. He talked to that dog like he was still there. Told him about his joints aching. About missing walks. About seeing a little too much sky and not enough paws on the carpet. I cried quietly there on the edge of the bed. Not because of the letters, but because he never told anyone. He just wrote to something he loved that wasn't coming back. That's how he coped. And suddenly, that sentence, "It's strange, knowing you've seen your last spring," it wasn't just about dying. It was about being the last one left. The last season. The last letter. The last window view. I realized then, that day when I walked in and sat with him, he had already made peace. He wasn't warning me. He wasn't looking for comfort. He was saying, "I've had enough. I've seen enough." He just wanted someone to hear it. Someone to carry it. And I didn't. I nodded. I made tea. I let the silence win. A few days later, my mom asked me to help clean out the garage. We put on gloves and old hoodies and opened that rusted door that hadn't moved in years. Dust and sunlight poured in like it had been waiting. There were tools, old fishing gear, a stack of boxes labeled in his handwriting. I opened one, it was full of cassette tapes. Home recordings. Some labeled, some not. Lake Trip 1992, Dad's 60th, Megan's Spelling Bee. I found an old player in another box. It still worked. I clicked in a tape, not expecting much. Crackling, then his voice. Young, lighter. "All right, we're out here at Lake Monroe. Kids are throwing rocks. Megan's crying about a sandwich. Typical day?" I laughed under my breath. I hadn't heard his voice that way in years, amused, energetic, a little sarcastic. Then I heard my own voice, small and clear. "Grandpa, look. I caught a frog. Let it go, kid. Everything that moves should be free." I froze. He said that all the time when I was a kid. I thought it was just something you say to make a kid stop torturing wildlife. But hearing it again, hearing the warmth in his voice, it hit different. Everything that moves should be free. I rewound it. Played it again. And again. I don't know why. I just couldn't stop hearing that one sentence. Because I think he meant it. About frogs. About dogs. About people. About himself. I think by the time I visited him that Thursday, he had decided to let himself go. And he wanted me to understand without forcing it on me. That's why he didn't cry. That's why he didn't make it dramatic. That's why he just looked out the window and said what he said. "It's strange, knowing you've seen your last spring." It wasn't a complaint. It was a thank you. A goodbye dressed up as a comment on the weather. Because that's how he talked. That's who he was. After we finished in the garage, I sat on the porch for a while. It was quiet and a little too cold for comfort. But I didn't move. The house felt different now, like the walls were holding their breath, waiting for someone to decide what comes next. My mom came out and sat beside me. She didn't say anything at first. Just held her coffee and looked out at the yard, same as he used to. After a while, she said, "You know, he wasn't always like that." "Like what?" "So quiet. So careful with his words." I looked over. She wasn't crying, just remembering. When I was a kid, he was loud. Laughing. Joking. Sometimes yelling. But always full. I couldn't picture it. He changed after the war. But I think it was losing Grandma that really emptied him out. He just got quieter. Started folding into himself. I didn't say anything. Then she added something I wasn't expecting. He used to tell me he didn't want anyone to have to take care of him. That he never wanted to be a burden. That hit harder than I expected. Because suddenly I remembered something. Something I hadn't thought about in years. I must have been 7 or 8. I tripped in the backyard and scraped my knee pretty bad. He carried me inside, set me on the counter, cleaned it up while I cried like the world was ending. And when he finished, he said, "Crying's fine, kid. But don't let anyone have to carry you longer than they have to. It's not their job." At the time, I thought it was a weird thing to say. Now, I think I understand. He lived his whole life trying not to be a weight on anyone. Even in the end, when his body gave out, he made it look like nothing. Like slipping out of a room without closing the door. And I hate that about him. I hate that he never let anyone really carry him. Not even me. That Thursday afternoon, the last time I saw him, he gave me a chance. A window. And I missed it. I treated it like just another visit. Made tea. Chatted about weather. Left too soon. And he let me. Because he didn't want to be a burden. Because he loved me more than he loved being known. A week after that, I went back to the house alone. I told my mom I was going to grab a few things, help her get a head start on sorting, maybe take the tapes or a few books. But honestly, I just wanted to be there. One more time. In the quiet. I walked through the living room, then down the short hallway to his bedroom. Everything still looked untouched. His slippers, the robe on the hook. I opened his closet. Ran my fingers along the sleeves of his jackets. I didn't know what I was looking for. Then I spotted a shoebox on the top shelf. Plain. Worn. No label. I pulled it down, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened it. Inside were dozens of folded papers, receipts, little scraps with notes in his handwriting. Most didn't make sense, reminders, addresses, grocery lists. But one folded paper stood out. It was thicker, carefully creased. I opened it. It was a drawing. A child's drawing, mine, from when I was maybe 5 or 6. Stick figures, a sun, a house that leaned to the left. And him labeled Grandpa holding a balloon. Underneath, in crooked letters, "You're my favorite person in the world." I stared at it for a long time. Not because it was surprising, but because I had no memory of making it. None. And yet, he kept it. All these years. On the back, in his handwriting, small, in pencil, were 3 lines, "Keep this safe. For when the world gets too quiet." So I remember who I was to someone. That's when I cried. Really cried. Because I realized I'd been wrong. He hadn't folded into himself because he stopped caring. He folded because he was carrying too much. He didn't want to put that weight on us. On me. But he did want to be remembered. Not as someone weak or fading. But as someone who once mattered. Who once held a balloon in a child's drawing and was someone's whole world. And he was. He still is. I didn't take much from the house. Just the tape of the lake trip. And the drawing. I folded it back along the same creases, tucked it into my jacket pocket, and walked to the front room. The recliner was still there by the window, untouched. I sat down in it. Same spot he always sat. Same angle. Same light. Outside, the tree in the yard was starting to bloom. Tiny green buds poking out like they were checking to see if it was safe. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the drawing, and set it on the side table right next to the mug he used every morning. Then I just sat there. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Because I understood now. He wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid of being forgotten. And this quiet moment was my way of saying I didn't forget. I still don't know why he told me the way he did. Maybe that was his version of a goodbye, soft, indirect, easy to miss. But the part that stays with me is that he knew I wouldn't catch it until it was too late. And he still said it anyway. It's strange knowing you've seen your last spring. He didn't need me to understand it then. He just needed me to hear it. And now I do. Every time the trees start to bloom, I hear it. And I wish I'd stayed 5 more minutes.